Right, Gareth, this is for you.
That would definitely be Nevermind by Nirvana, which actually had not necessarily a good effect for a little while. So before that came out, I would have been 11 when that came out, and before then, I would have listened to just about anything. So my parents had, like, my dad had some old metal stuff and some old prog rock stuff, and my mum was into Bowie and punk, but I was listening to pop and that kind of thing on the radio as well. So I had a really wide, eclectic taste. And then that came out, and then I didn't like anything but Nirvana, and specifically Nevermind, for about 6 months. That was it. And there was almost like a scorched earth policy of rebuilding from that upwards, like, kind of, well, I suppose I quite like Suede. Yeah, okay, right. Yep, okay, Lemonheads, yep, they're acceptable. And then just sort of expanding out from there, I guess. But yeah, I would have to say it was Nevermind. Still listen to it from time to time. Got really sick of it in the mid-90s, but it's a good album. It's a good album.
Favorite song on Nevermind?
This varies, but I think I would have to go for Lounge Act if I was pressed. Mainly because it's one of the ones that doesn't get overplayed for a start, and secondly because it's got a really good bass line that I've never ever been able to play. So yeah,
okay,
there we go.
Carl, what about you?
Similar. Probably Green Day. Probably Dookie. I think that was like a gateway band for me when I was like 12, 13, or however old I was when that came out. I remember there used to be Top of the Pops 2, and it used to be on at Saturday, like tea time, like 5:30, 6 o'clock. And at the time, me and a few of my mates used to go ice skating in D-side ice rink every Saturday night. And our mate's dad used to take us there. He was a steward, and we'd always watch Top of the Pops 2 before we went. And then on the way back, his dad would let us listen to some music, whatever we wanted. And John's dad was like into Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple and stuff like that. I always remember waiting to get picked up, and it was about like 10 to 6, and he was picking me up at like 6 o'clock. And it got to like, it was the last song, and it was Basket Case by Green Day. And they were outside beeping. I was like, I've got to watch the end of this song. This is like, I just really like this song. So probably that. I preferred Insomniac by Green Day because previous to that I'd kind of listened to like Metallica and Guns N' Roses sort of in passing as a kid, and my dad was really into like Sabbath and stuff like that. My dad always had really good taste in music, so he was listening to like Faith No More and things like that, so I was aware of that. But Green Day were like the first band that I could like sort of say, yeah, that's me, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't Oasis, and it wasn't like happy hardcore dance music or any stuff like that the other kids in school were listening to. So in schools, maybe like 6 or 7 of us who were kind of all got into it around the same time. I'm still mates with all of them now, my friends. So I'd probably say Green Day, Dookie, Stroke, Insomnia.
Cool. Ali, what about you?
I think a kind of similar path. So it was like the Nirvana as a starting point for like changing perspective, and then I got into like Green Day, Offspring, and then got really into NoFX and got quite obsessive with NoFX. But then I went to see Samiam in Liverpool, and it was my first ever gig in Liverpool. And I'd seen Samiam on the video on Raw Power, Raw Power on Friday nights. And so I went to see them on the back of that, and Texas the Reason were supporting them. I'd never heard of them before then, and it just, to me, it was like that kind of melding of like the pop punk and the grungy Nirvana stuff, because I didn't know what post-hardcore was at the time, so it was just this weird kind of blend of things that I'd liked in the past, and that kind of completely opened me up to like having this kind of post-hardcore kind of sensibility to songwriting. So I kind of got really into different things based on that. And I think then on a completely different tangent was getting into so Texas Reason, and the album was Do You Know Who You Are? And then later on there was a band called Rachel's, and their album was Songs for Egon Shale. that was just really got me into kind of classical, kind of like the neo chamber music stuff. Because they had, people that were in Juno 44 and stuff like that, so that kind of gave it that kind of cool credential to basically listen to classical music.
Where was that Samian gig?
It was in Guinans. It was upstairs in Guinans, not downstairs. I think it was the only time that I'd seen, certainly while it was Guinans, I'd ever seen a gig upstairs in Guinans. It was the first ever gig I went to.
Sound
cool. My answer to that first album changed my outlook. When I was at school, I was listening to like Dire Straits, and I still love them to this day. And even earlier than that, when I was a kid, I think I watched Status Quo on something on the television, like a Top of the Pops or something. But the very first album that I went out and bought, and I still remember, it was a place it's well gone now. It's opposite St John's where Clayton Square is now. It was called Cut Price Records, and went in there and it was shutting down. And I'd seen the first Black Sabbath album, and I'd heard of them before and stuff, and obviously had Paranoid, but I hadn't heard the first album. Looked at the cover, and to me that cover still today. And I went to visit it just a couple of years ago, Maple Durham, where the big building and the windmill is. And I got it home. I was about 14, I think, 13 or 14. Got it home, put it on, and that was it. Like that was music for me, and that's where that sort of I headed then. So yeah, first Black Sabbath album, like sort of. This one's for Gary first.
It's going to be a short one. No,
okay.
No. I haven't got anything. No.
Okay, fair enough. Now, what about you?
Sorry, me or
okay.
I not really. I mean, I've been kind of generally fine most of the time, but I do prefer to have my nails painted if we're doing a gig, because I somewhere in my head it got into my head that I will have worse gigs if I don't have my nails painted. So there we go.
That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
What about you, Carl?
Yeah, I've got a few. Trying not to shit myself. Grow up. Because I get really nervous before we play. I do my best to hide it, but I tend to slope off to the toilet quite a lot just before we play. I always have to have 2 beers before we play, just 2. I always change my t-shirt before we play. And I always put deodorant on as well for some reason. And face cream. Yeah. Have to do it. Have to nip off to the toilet at some point just before we play to do that.
That's quite a routine.
It's quite a routine. Yeah. I remember I didn't do it once, and all I kept thinking was, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do that? But I'm a bit weird like that anyway. So yeah, so they're my routines.
Yeah, mine's pretty boring really. When on the way to a gig, I always pack a bag with a bottle of water, a towel, and a t-shirt. I'm the opposite way down to you. I'll change my t-shirt after the gig because I'm normally like soaked in sweat. Same again. I like to have at least 1 pint, maybe 2 at maximum before I play, just to sort of, I don't know, as you say, settle nerves or anything. But I think as I've got more experience and playing over the years, I feel less and less anxious or nervous before going on now. I feel more nervous doing this actually than to be honest. But yeah, that's basically all I do. So yeah, good answers. Thanks for that. Let's have Gareth first.
Okay. So I mentioned Suede before, and their bass player Matt Osman is just a really good bass player. He's not anything other than that. I think he's written or he's credited with writing 1 song ever for Suede. Yeah, he's just very good at what he does. Complements the rest of the music going on. Anybody who's heard Suede will know it's kind of there's quite a lot of intricate stuff going on. And you know he adds to that in a very good way. He's also why I play a Fender Precision on stage, because the first the first 5 gigs I ever went to, 4 of them were Suede gigs on the Dogman Star Tour, and he was playing a turquoise Fender Precision.
Nice.
So I got one, although mine's red. So there we go. So that's how you can tell them apart. Yeah, because me and Matt Osmond stand next to each other the entire time. So we've got to be careful about these kind of things.
Right, that's great. Carl, what about you?
A few. Always a big fan of Henry Rollins. Everything he's ever done, really, his spoken word stuff, his stuff in Black Flag. Funny, like as a like being like the singer in a hardcore band, there's sort of this like, I don't know, this like sort of idea that you've got to kind of be like confrontational or like, you know, rough. And who I really like is just sort of like the opposite of that is Damien from Fucked Up. He comes across as like a really nice person, and he is a nice person, but he's a big burly guy who goes into the crowd, but you never sort of fear him, if you know what I mean. You never sort of think, oh, you know, I don't want to mess with him. You'd go up and give him a hug. So as a frontman for that, sort of lyric-wise, and I like a lot of like country music, and I'm a big fan of like Johnny Cash, John Prine, who recently just passed away a couple of days ago. Generally just sort of like odd hardcore. Like I always like the odder end of hardcore is like a musical influence, so stuff like No Means No or Really Red and bands like that who were sort of hardcore bands, but they had like a different sort of take on it. That's why I always like the later Black Flag that nobody else likes, just because it's a bit dirgy, but I quite like dirge. Yeah. So yeah, they're a few of mine. I mean, I've got loads of sort of bands and singers and people I admire, but yeah, they're just a couple of them really.
You just to go like on, you can add this too. You can answer this too, Gary, as well if you want to. Do you listen back to the stuff we record and you think, oh, I can hear me being influenced by that person there, subconsciously?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's even just sort of like diction, you know, like the patterns of sort of vocal pattern. Could definitely hear like. Someone said that we sound a bit like, a lot of people said we sound a bit like Fugazi at times, and you can hear that definitely. So yeah, it's probably just subconscious really. I don't think you'd sort of go, right, I'm gonna in this particular song I'm gonna sound like this. I think it's just the way it comes out really, but you can definitely hear it.
Yeah, great. Okay, and Gary?
Mine is Mike Watt from Minutemen. Firehose, and he's done other things. So he did like DOS with Kira from Black Flag, who he was married to at one point, and he's played, toured with bass players for the Stooges. He's done. He basically kind of comes up with different bands every other week, basically. But it's that kind of, it's the longevity of him, and just the. I suppose the fact that he's so grounded, so he still kind of carries his own gear to gigs and wheels his own amps in, and he's really humble, and he takes time to speak to you after the gigs, and he's got his own kind of little way he speaks and his own kind of little kind of vocal things that make him kind of quite individual, but he never comes across, even though he's got like all these weird words, he never comes across as being kind of arsey or anything. It's all seemed very kind of natural and just the way he is. And
calls people cats.
What's that?
Calls people cats, which Ned Flanders dad.
Yeah. But yeah, he's just. I mean, I've spoken to him a few times at gigs, and he just seems like just a lovely fella, and just keeps going. He doesn't care the fact that he's played stadiums with the Stooges. He's just as happy to play in a pub to a couple hundred people, and still does what he does at 60 odd.
Brilliant. It's a good person to choose, that Gary. Just to answer my own question, I was saying, as I was saying before, when I play something and then I listen back to it, I can hear it. It just comes to me, and I think I've got that idea there from something I listened to. Like, say, for instance, Nickel McBrain out of Iron Maiden, the drummer, and Clive Bear, the drummer before him in Iron Maiden, because I used to listen to Iron Maiden a lot. So I know our band's obviously nothing like Iron Maiden, but when I listen back to what we've recorded, I think, just that little accent there I've put, I know where I got that from, and it's sort of only after I do it, like subconsciously I'm putting it into the music, and obviously that's an influence to me. And also, someone a bit more obscure, the first Pavement drummer, who I had to look up his name. His name's Gary Young, and I think I've spoken to you about this story when they were recording Slanted and Enchanted, and they were doing it in the basement, and the guitarist was in like the kitchen. So every time he wanted them to go like apeshit on the kit, he'd just come in and nod to him. And I just really like, he's got like a really loose style, and if you listen to that album and just listen to the drums, for me anyway, it's just really, it influenced me loads. And also more basic players as well, like Phil Rudd out of AC/DC, but he just plays a straight 4/4 beat all the time. That's like a big influence on me as well, because that taught me that although I do admire like people like Neil Peart, rest in peace, who can like do all fancy stuff, it's great to hear drummers just lay down a backbeat as well. So, yeah. I think that's my questions finished.